And I call this the Studio Q show live because you guys are here live with me. We'll have a bunch of people coming in over on YouTube and, a couple of YouTube streams. So welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody. We'll give them a few minutes to come in. I think you guys will like today. It's a good show. It's going to be packed with some more information about negatives and redeveloping, but we'll go over some other things too. Hello, Karsten and Will and Steve. Good to see you, Steve. And Samuel of Deutschland and Chris from Germany as well too. Good to see everybody. And of course, Boguslav, hola todos, Pablo, everybody. And Sean, I don't know you, but good to see you. Welcome, welcome. So let's do this. Let's see if we can't get our, oh, and there's Fareed as well. Good to see you too. You shoot mirrorless. Well, there you go. That's a good t-shirt to have on today. I shoot, here's my t-shirt today. It's like a big coat on me. Hey, nice. Vintage 65. Boguslav, were you born in 65? Right on. I was born in 64, so pretty close. Pretty close. Anyway, enough bantering, I guess. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and open this thing up, and we'll jump right into what we're doing. But seriously, welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming in this morning, this afternoon, this evening, or if you're watching it down the road or listening to it. I have a lot of people that write me and say, they listen to it. Sometimes they don't necessarily watch it. They'll just listen to it. And that's cool too. I like that. So I appreciate everyone's support and cooperation that way. So let's go over here and share this screen. We're going to jump right into this stuff because I know how you guys love to eat this technical junk up. Let's say view, present. And we all know what the show is about today. We'll just reiterate real quickly. I'm going to spend the majority of time in this hour or so talking about redeveloping negatives and or intensifying negatives. Kind of clear the air about that, about what it is. No big secrets. Nobody's going to give you any mysterious mumbo jumbo. This is what's really funny. Everything out there today, and I mean everything, every scrap of contemporary literature that's been written or will be written, including mine, come, whether directly or indirectly, from this 19th and early 20th century literature. That's what we're gonna look at two books today. Taller's book, Silver Sunbeam, and another book, Chapman. You've never heard of him before, I'm sure. He's in the late 1890s. We're gonna look at both of those as references. So nobody's going to show you anything new about this stuff. We're going to translate and bring into the modern vernacular, the modern way of we speak and think and all that stuff. We're going to bring it up to par so you guys have a shot at doing this. Then we'll do a technical Q&A. I got a couple of questions, recommended reading, recommended watching, and shout outs, of course. We always like to do the shout outs. So I'm going to jump right into this thing, and we're going to start talking about the Silver Sunbeam. This is Jay Taller, Dr. Taller. I love how he. This is published in 1864, 100 years before I was born. I love how Taller. He's a medical doctor, but if you look on the book right there, if you guys probably can't quite see it, but what. Right on the book here, he talks about Jay Taller, medical doctor, professor of natural philosophy and chemistry. I love it. That's so cool. I love his title. That's a great title. A lot of folks don't know that he was a medical doctor. And a lot of people don't know that these 19th century, especially the early ones that came into this profession, came into photography. Photography didn't exist before 1839, at least the photography we know today. And a lot of these guys, mostly men, unfortunately, were in the science fields. And I was just talking the other day. I believe I mentioned this to Maureen, a woman that called me from Boston. We had a chat about wet collodion and some technical stuff and conceptual stuff. And I told her, The main occupation before, that's what it was. She doesn't have any photography experience and she's getting into wet plate. And we had this discussion. And I said, yeah, well, before photography, there weren't any photographers, right? So what were these people? What did they do for a profession? A lot of them were scientists, medical doctors, but there was a large portion of them that were pharmacists. And that makes sense, right? Understanding the chemistry, understanding, having access to everything. It totally makes sense. Anyway, that's Taylor's Silver Sunbeam. That's who we're going to read from today, at least one of them. This is an excerpt from his Silver Sunbeam, 1864, about iodine redevelopment. And we're going to talk about the difference between iodine redevelopment and copper, and what we call copper intensification. There's Maureen. Welcome. And Hank from Holland. I just saw Hank up there. Hello, Maureen.
Hi.
So at the end of the day, what we have is what we want to do is draw from that primary literature to learn what these guys did and to make it work. Unfortunately, there's one caveat when you take into consideration this primary literature or original writings on the process. A lot of these guys, unfortunately, were so wrapped up in making money with this, and I understand that they actually misled people in their technical manuals. So they told you to do something wrong. It would screw you all up, right? Didn't happen very often, but there are some cases that they'll lead you down the wrong road. And it's like I said, not extremely common, but it can happen. But the Silver Sunbeam is one of those classic books. If you don't have a copy of it, grab it, download it from Google Books. Like I always say every week, you can get all of these on Google Books. I am giving you nothing other than maybe my book, right, that I try to sell or try to pitch to you. I'm giving you nothing that you can't get online for free, right? I mean, you can just download these primary literature works. What I try to do is I try to translate those into that modern vernacular verbiage, minins and drachmas and all these measurements, and trying to decipher if English isn't your first language. That 19th century English can be a bear. It is even for me. I don't speak that English that well. I think I read it a little better, but boy, that 19th century literature, that's tough on me. Anyway, no offense, Britain. I know you guys probably love that. Hello, Sasha and Peter and Paul. Hey, Paul, good to see you. And Mark Zimmerman and Linda. Yay, and Malit, youngsters, and Steve. Yeah, good, great. We got, and Jan. I always like to make sure I get everybody in there because everybody's important in this group, everybody. So let's do this. Let's talk about Taylor's iodine redevelopment. We talked about a negative, making a negative last week, how to make a negative, a little bit of differences in there. We're going to review some of that as we go through this. But let's talk about Taylor's interpretation of iodine redevelopment. It says, now in order to restore the partially developed image to the chemical condition requisite for the recommence of the development. How about that? Right off the bat. We're not 15 words in here and your heads are spinning. What? What is it talking about? A solution of iodine or iodide or potassium or a dilute solution of tincture of iodine, meaning it has a little bit of alcohol in it, is flowed over the plate. So right off the bat, I could say it a lot quicker. You dilute some iodine down to a nice red color and you pour it on the plate, right? You dilute it down and you pour it on the plate. That's all we're talking about. What does iodine and silver, the metallic silver coming into contact with each other create? Creates AgI, or silver iodide. That's a light sensitive halogen, right? If you look at old school photography now, the film photography, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about silver gelatin, silver prints, silver chloride, silver iodide, silver bromide, all those components in silver. So he says, float over the plate and keep it in motion to preserve uniformity. I've had people send me photographs of their negatives after they've redeveloped, and they've got these swirls or this kind of iridescent kind of look going on and whirligigs and all kinds of stuff. This is where it comes from mostly. If you don't keep the iodine moving on the plate, you can get some marks, kind of like Developer a little bit. And in essence, it's a weird combination there. In essence, you are redeveloping it, but in this stage, you're sensitizing that silver to take on light, to take on silver nitrate, and to take on pyrogallic acid. We want to stain it and build up those highlight areas and leave those shadow areas void. He says it enters into the combination, thicker deposit of the iodide of silver. So that's what I just said. What's going to happen is just with the iodine, keep this in mind, just with the iodine, pouring it on that plate, letting it turn, it loses its color, it turns to silver, kind of a purple, yellow, gray color. It absorbs the iodine in and resensitizes or rehalogenates the plate to some degree. Sometimes, I've had this happen, sometimes I can just do the iodine, wash it off, expose it to the light, and bring it back in, and it's got enough density to print. Sometimes that will happen. Just the iodine and light alone. But if you don't get enough density from that, you move on to the next step, which is putting the pyro, the citric, and the silver nitrate, and start to really pack on the density on the plate. So he says right there, the solution of iodine on the collodion loses color, all the white, but the collodion film assumes at first a grayish, then a yellow-gray hue. If you've never redeveloped an image, you need to do this in low white light so you can observe all of this. You can watch the iodine. I'm going to show you a video of me doing this. You can watch that happen and you'll actually see the iodine lose its color. In fact, in workshops, I tell people, now turn the plate and drip some of that iodine off. And it's perfectly clear. There's no color to it. It's all absorbed into the silver, okay? So that's the process you want to go through. The first step is to rehalogenate or resensitize that silver, metallic silver on the plate. So he talks about he talks about going through and redeveloping that to your taste, or talks about the potential of doing that. I would recommend it is also the preparation of clear and sharp negatives for obtaining enlarged positives in the solar camera. Kind of a deviation here, but check this out. As soon as the depositing stage is complete and the film has been washed, the collodion film is ready for the reception of the next operation. And what is the next operation? We're going to put the pyro and the silver and the citric acid over it. So here we go. The second stage consists in communicating to the iodized image a minute quantity of silver nitrate, either alone or diluted, or in connection with the developer. I choose the latter. I like to mix the citric acid, the silver nitrate, and the pyrogallic acid all together. And I call them cups, 20 milliliters, 40 milliliters, 60, 80, whatever you want to use, right? It is, in fact, a mere repetition of the original process of development. And that's what I tell people. You go on, you go off. You go on, you go off. I'm going to tell you something new today about redevelopment. I'll expand on this a little bit later. But you don't have to do it by hand, on and off. You can actually do full immersion of the plate in this solution and redevelop that way. So you don't have to do it by hand if you don't want to. The second stage is a system or process of redevelopment. By this operation, the intensity may be increased to any extent. I've tried this. I've gone through about 150, 200 mils of redevelopment and a lot of silver nitrate on a plate, and I turned it absolutely no light, absolutely nothing coming through the highlights. It was just silver and glass, period. You can take it to any extreme you want. Usually, what I find, I try to get as close as I can with the foundation negative, meaning the negative coming out of the camera without redevelopment, and then I just do a little touch-up. I usually call it a 20 or 40 mil cup touch-up or redevelopment. We'll talk about that in a minute. To an extent, the shadows can be made quite opaque and utterly impermeable to the actinic influence. Yeah, check that verbiage out, meaning you can make it so dense, no light, no UV light will penetrate the highlights, nothing. It'll be completely white paper. The intensifying part of the collodion process is very much in the power of the artist. He calls this now, he went from redeveloping the negative to now he's calling it intensifying, or at least using that word, which intensifying to us means something a little different. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Therefore, it will depend principally on the artistic condition of what I denominate the foundation negative. A foundation negative is that exposure in the camera, you pull the negative out, you don't redevelop it. That's a foundation negative. You're going to see one here in just a minute in video that I made in Germany. You'll see one of those. If the foundation negative is, however, thin in the shadows, maybe contains light shades, middle tones of perfect detail, the artist has it in his power, of course his, right? They're very sexist. In his or her power to raise these three conditions gradually and uniformly higher. Meaning, you want to take this, you want to consider the entire image and bring everything up uniform when you're redeveloping. And it naturally does happen. I mean, you can isolate too if you want. At the end stage, the fixing solution have but little effect, which seems to demonstrate that the yellowish gray iodide has been converted into an insoluble metallic film or an unknown insoluble silver salt. In other words, he's saying you don't need to fix after you do this. There's no need to fix. You're not removing any unexposed silver. This is a glass plate that you've already exposed, developed, washed, fixed, washed again, and now you've redeveloped. You're just intensifying the silver on that plate. You're not removing any unexposed silver. There's no fixing involved in redevelopment, none. So that's what that means. It says it's not necessary to use a fixing solution. All that is required is to wash the image well before it is dried and varnished. So there's his little take on what we're talking about, iodine redevelopment. This is from my book, Chemical Pictures, the new one. You can look through this, but basically what I've done, this is Towler, what we just read right there. This is my conversion of his process, workflow, and methodology. This is what I use. This is exactly, I've changed a couple of things since my last one. I've upped the content of pyrogalic acid. I've upped the content or the amount of citric acid. I found that I can, between 4 and 6 grams a liter, I can redevelop real quick. I don't want to stand there for 45 minutes or an hour doing this. Usually I can redevelop a negative for good density for anything I want in 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe. So you can look through that, screenshot it if you want. I'm just telling you what kind of iodine, what I use, the redeveloper solution or staining the plate, the density builder, the Agno 3, the 10 drops of silver, the iodine. I just kind of go through all that. And then the second part of it, redeveloping the plate, expose the plate, redevelop it. You're going to see all this. So you can kind of, I know this may be confusing to you, but just hear me out for a minute. You can also use a process called copper intensification. It's where you bleach the silver with bromide and ammonium bromide and copper sulfate or potassium bromide, and drop it in silver nitrate. Just a pan of silver nitrate. You just drop that thing in there. It's great. It's fine, and you can reduce the intensity of that too by the amount of bleaching you do with the copper sulfate and the bromide, and the amount of silver you have in your pan. You can do a mild intensification, or you can do hardcore intensification. You drop the plate in, it just flashes up, and it goes all out. What is redeveloping? What is intensifying? Here we go. Iodine redevelopment, we've just been talking about. We use pyrogalic acid, citric acid, and a little bit of silver nitrate. We apply it at 20 to 80 mils or cups at a time, pour on, pour off. Or you can do full immersion, like I was saying. I just read this the other day, that if you mix up your redevelopment, your pyro, your citric, and a little bit of silver nitrate in a pan, you can do the full immersion and just sit and redevelop that way. And just you can try it and see if it works for you. I like to do the hand method. I'm kind of a control freak, so I like that a lot better. What is copper intensification? So when we use these words, we've got to be really clear so people know what we're talking about. When we say redevelop, we mean iodine redeveloping, the first one, the pyrogalic, the citric, the water, and the silver nitrate, on, off, on, off. When we say intensification, we're usually referring to the copper intensification, meaning the copper sulfate, the ammonium bromide, to bleach it, bleach all the silver down to white. You can actually see it in the pan. It's kind of a green solution because of the copper sulfate, but you can watch that image bleach out, kind of like watching the iodine you pour on the plate when you're doing redevelopment. Watch that kind of turn purple, gray. You're absorbing that iodine, the iodine clears. The bleach, the intensification, will actually turn your silvers white. And what's called bleached all the way to the back, you'll read in that old manual that I recommended last week from Kodak. They talk about that. They talk about the intensification. Then you use a silver bath, usually 10 to 15%. I've heard people using all the way up to 20%. You drop the plate in it after it's bleached and it just pops up, all intensified. All the silver on there takes on that silver nitrate and just builds up. Advantages and disadvantages. Why would you use iodine redevelopment over copper intensification or vice versa? Okay, here's my take. Your mileage may vary. It depends. You may think a little bit differently about this. I like iodine redevelopment simply for the fact I have complete control of it. I can just do 1 cup on a negative and be done, or a half a cup, or 10 mils, or 100 mils. I can, whatever I want to do. I have complete control. Copper intensification or intensification, I don't have that much control. I drop the plate in and there it goes. You can, like I said, adjust those bleaching solutions and the amount of silver nitrate you use to intensify. But at the end of the day, you're going to get whatever happens when you throw that plate in that pan. That's it. You're going to get that. The advantage of copper intensification would be that you're not handling pyrogallic acid. That would be one big one. If you don't like these dangerous chemicals, or you don't know how to mitigate them, or you don't feel comfortable with it, don't mess with it. Advantage, disadvantage, control, safety. Most of the time, intensification is fine for people. I think intensification is more expensive because now you've got another silver bath that you have to deal with and maintain if you're going to intensify your plates, versus just mixing up small batches. And the shelf life on iodine and pyro and all that are quite long. You know, it's more than you'd think as far as shelf life goes. So you can make them less expensive, but you've got to handle the pyro, and a lot of people don't like that. And I understand that. So there's the difference. How do you build density in the negative? One's iodine redevelopment, one's copper intensification, and you can do either. Let's look at Mr. Jones's book here. Harry, I called him Henry Chapman. This guy with the 3. I'm suspicious of people with 3 names. No, I'm not. I know a lot of people have that, but I'm always curious. Henry Chapman Jones. I mean, maybe Henry Jones. There's a lot of Henry Joneses back in the day. Probably still are today. No offense to Henry Joneses, but this is Henry Chapman Jones, 1895, an introduction to the science and practice of photography. Again, download this book and read it. These are great books to have. Put them in your bookshelf, on your bookshelf, pull them out and refer them to them. You're going to learn something new every single time you pull one of these down. Even if you've read it 3 or 4 times, you just always pick something up. Let's talk about what he says here. It's really interesting how some of these guys delineate this stuff. Wet collodion negative as developed is often too thin and requires intensification or redevelopment. There he uses, this is 1895, mind you, and there he uses both the words, right? Intensification or redevelopment. I don't hyphenate redevelopment in English, but this is simply a continuation of the developing process after washing the plate, but as no more detail is wanted, the redeveloping solution may be more restrained. So what he's saying is you can adjust to how much you want to do this or not, basically. No alcohol is needed because a simple aqueous solution will flow over the well-washed plate, but a little silver nitrate must be added to supply the metal to deposit upon the image, basically is what he's saying. A few drops of a solution of silver nitrate containing 10 grains to the ounce. Do you remember what 10 grains is? It's okay, this is 1895. Or to the ounce, or 20 grams to the liter. That means a 2% solution, right? 20 grams to 1,000 milliliters or 1,000 cc is 2%. is added to the redeveloper immediately before it's applied to the film. Other methods of intensification, such as those given for connection with the gelatin plates, are available after fixing, and these processes have the advantage of producing a certain proportional result if properly used. For fixing collodion negatives, hyposulfite of soda, this is sodium thiosulfate, okay, or hypo. We call it hypo, sodium thiosulfate. Is to be preferred to the potassium cyanide for the same reason that it is preferred for the gelatin plates, that there is less probability of the cyanide attacking the image of a collodion film. The hypo may be 4 ounces to the pint or 200 grams to the liter, meaning a 20% solution of hypo and a 2% solution of silver. I disagree with him here. I use potassium cyanide to clear my negatives, but I do it very, very carefully. In other words, we talked last week, cyanide will eat away the halftones of the plate real quick. It loves silver. It just consumes silver. That's why it removes all the unexposed silver off your plate, right? So the pyro, if you don't watch it, we talked last week, do an overexposed ambrotype and leave it in your cyanide extra little while. It'll take those tints and halftones away quickly. If you don't watch it, you can damage your negative. That's what he's saying there. So, and if you like to use sodium thiosulfate, that's fine as well too. I happen to use cyanide and I watch it very carefully. There's some of the mixtures there for your quantities. Either pyrogalic acid or ferrous sulfate will develop the exposed wet collodion plate. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want, Malit asked last week, I think it was, or the week before, she asked about using ferrous sulfate. There's a lot of folks that don't want to deal with pyrogalic acid. I get it, no problem. Use ferrous sulfate. And here's a good example of it. Oh, I guess you can't quite see that, huh? Let me move this real quick. Oh, I guess I can't. Anyway, I'll read it to you. The usual strength of pyrogalic acid is 1 grain to the ounce, or 2 grams. 2 grams to 1 liter. So that's 0.2%, right? So we go from, 5. We look at the variations from going. Towers, now we're going to a very, very weak solution in Chapman's book about using 2 grams to the liter. And if ferrous sulfate is used, it may be from 20 to 30 grains an ounce, or 40 to 60 grams, 4 to 6% ferrous sulfate. See the power difference there between the two? 0.2% on the pyrogalic acid and 4 to 6% on the iron. So you can use ferrous sulfate in redevelopment. It's going to be a little more difficult. It's going to take more time to achieve what you want. Pyro is fast and effective. Again, it's just like cyanide versus hypo. A weak developer tends to produce contrast. A strong developer tends to softness because the detail in the darkest parts brought out before the lights have time to grow dense. So you kind of understand what he's saying there? Whatever developer is used, it must be retarded or restrained. And acetic acid is generally used for this purpose. 20 minims of glacial acetic acid each ounce of developer, or 40 cc's to 1,000, 40 milliliters to 1,000 milliliters of water is effective. Half this quantity or even less may be used, but the development is liable to be irregular and stains may be produced. You've got to be careful about stains when you're redeveloping. And if you ever do it, you're going to see what I mean when I talk about stains. Let's see. No alcohol is needed because the simple aqueous solution will flow over the well-washed plate, just like we probably took that from Taller, right? We just read that in the beginning. But a little silver nitrate must be added to supply the metal for deposits, right, upon the image, to deposit it on the image. A few drops of a solution of silver nitrate containing 10 grains to the ounce or 20 grams to the liter, again, there it is, 2%, is added to the redeveloper immediately before it's applied to the film. Other methods of intensification and connection, yeah, we already read that. And we talked about attacking the image there. That's kind of a repeat of the last one, but just to reiterate a little bit. And then here's the full immersion. This is from Photographic Times, 1900. They go down in class. They love to use mercury a lot in the 19th century. And this is the third class of redeveloper, this pyrointensification. This is the precipitation of metallic silver onto the silver in the film. This is a one solution method. So to a solution of citric, I love this. To a solution of citric acid is added some pyro and some silver nitrate solution. The plate is placed in this bath until the required density is gained. So there you go. Just a couple of words telling you could do a full immersion on the plate in a pan of this or in a tray of this solution, and it would basically give you the same results of on, off with a cup or with a graduate. Developing by hand. The action of the developer has already been described as it is to mix with the nitrate of silver, it adheres to the plate. He goes on to talk about unless it is desired to purposely reduce the vigor of the negative, the developing solution must not be allowed to overflow when it's poured on the plate, for it would carry away some of the silver nitrate upon which the vigor of the resulting negative depends. So let me translate that for you. When I teach development on a negative or positive, I teach the smallest amount that you can use for the size of the plate, pour it on, try to keep as much on the plate, but cover the plate, and then pour it off and catch it in your little cup again and pour it out and then start working your magic. This does a couple of things. It helps build density, it helps with color, and it's cost effective too, right? You're not pouring a bunch of developer in a helper tray and swashing that stuff around. He's talking about you don't want feeble images. That's what he's talking about there, unless you want to reduce the vigor of the negative. So meaning that you're going to have more contrast, more oomph if you do it this way, if you use this technique that he's talking about. Less is more. Keep it on the plate, catch it, put it back on. Yeah, we already talked about that. A weak developer tends to produce contrast. A strong developer tends to softness. We talked about glacial acetic acid. And then one more thing here. People talk, I don't know how many emails I've gotten about this. Quinn, what do you think about copper sulfate developer? And I tell them, I think it's not as good as ferrous sulfate, if that's what you want to know. Let's talk about what copper sulfate is, or what copper sulfate does. If you read right here, instead of sulfate of iron, he's talking about a double iron here. Double sulfate of iron, ammonia may be employed, or copper sulfate may be used in addition to the ferrous sulfate, and in each case the solution is made more stable. So copper sulfate will help you stabilize, meaning it won't oxidize as fast, right? So when your ferrous sulfate in your developer turns red, it rusts, that's oxidation. Copper sulfate will help stabilize that, right? So there's nowhere in the 19th century or 20th century literature that you're going to read people are using exclusive copper sulfate for developing. Can you? Yeah, you can. But you're going to get better results with iron, with ferrous sulfate. And you're going to, and you can stabilize that if you want, add a little copper sulfate in there, as he's talking about. And then we go down here. Here's hypo, 20% and KCN5 again. I had to break this book up, so some of it's redundant, but it's okay. Redundancy is good. Let's see what we have here. I'm going to show you this little video. I may skip through. Oh, Fareed asked a question. Oh, whoa. Skipping UV or Expo, or did that count? No, Pablo. So after you do the iodine, wash it off, get that greasiness off of there, just like in developing. Take it out and expose it to some UV. And again, when you come back in, you might find that you build enough density that you don't even have to do the pyro, citric acid, and silver nitrate. Usually you'll want to. Usually you're probably dealing with a negative that needs a little help. And so yes, you expose that after you've washed the iodine from the plate. It's sensitized. It'll take on light. It'll take on silver. It'll take on pyro now. So you go expose it to the light. And then, for instance, does it work to use 100 mil and pour each catch, re-pour bit by bit? Oh, no, yeah, you can. If you're going to use that much for each, make 100 mils of it. Fill it up, right? On, off. Or do 200 mils and do a full immersion plate, something like that. Yeah, no, you can do it any way you want. You just have to watch for staining. Link for Jones's book. Robert, just go to Google Books and search his name. You'll find it. Or somebody can put it up there. 3 names and a boat. Hey, Dale, how you doing, buddy? I have 3. I don't know what Samuel says there. Robert, March, Perverse Iodine Development as well. Galacia, hello, Carlos. Yes, I prefer, for the reasons that I've given you. Have I done copper intensification? Yes, absolutely. Quite a bit of it, actually. I used to teach it in workshops, but it became such a burden, just the silver nitrate quantity alone. Having another bath of silver nitrate to deal with is quite expensive for a lot of folks. But some people just didn't want to deal with pyro, so they like an alternative, and that's why I used to teach it. I don't anymore. It just doesn't make sense. There's too many plates spinning here. So let's do this. Let's watch. I may skip through this a little bit, but let's watch a video. And hopefully you can see the density differences here.
I've washed this in water here for about 5 minutes or so. Now I'm going to redevelop it. And let me show you what that means. I have my 9% solution here of silver nitrate with a little dropper. I have a little, this actually goes up to about 120 mils. So I'm going to do about 80 or 90 mils, probably 80 mils in this cup of pyrogalic redeveloper that we made here earlier that you saw in the video, or you've watched the video. And we also have a weak solution of iodine mixed with distilled water. This is about the color you wanted that. This is the first thing we do, and then I'm going to show you the rest of it. So here we go. The first thing we have to do is make that silver sensitive to light again. And if you want, you can use distilled water through this whole process. You'll see where I use it. I don't use it here. I do it after the silver is introduced. But pour a meniscus of iodine onto the plate. And you'll see that here. I'm sure you can see the color of that. It's different than the clear plate. I'm going to work this around on the plate. What is this doing? What happens when you put iodine with silver? Remember, that's pure metallic silver, right? We process this plate. It forms silver iodide, basically, or it kind of rehalogenates the plate just a little bit. Now, what I'm looking for here is a transparent color of that iodine. As it loses color, that means it's absorbing into the silver, into the collodion and silver there. And look at that, we're almost there. We have a little bit of color left, but we're almost there. And also your highlights turn a little purplish, grays out a little more. And then when your iodine is completely clear, which that is, look at that, drops in the water, there's nothing there.
Clear
under the
stuff,
water. Now
just
look at
completely
this.
clear.
This will remind you of something that you've seen quite a bit here. If I push this under the water, look at that. Does it remind you of anything? You know how greasy that is.
Rivulets.
You go until it's not greasy any longer.
No more rivulets.
Yeah. There we go. Just like that. Okay? Not greasy. Now take this out and expose it to about 20 or 30 seconds of UV light. That's what I'm going to do right now. All right, I'm back. I just exposed that to UV light, sunlight out there in my window actually.
You can see it's gaining density already. Just that little bit there, just the iodine and a little bit of light on it, boom. Probably a half to 3/4 of a stop. I don't know. I could have done the densitometer and found out, but you'll get the idea. But watch when I build this up.
Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some distilled water. And I'm going to just go over the surface of this one time because I'm going to introduce a little bit of silver nitrate into this now. And this is how I do it. Everyone has their own method. This is my method. The pyrogallic acid that we made, you can watch the video. This is the very solution we made. I'm going to pour, this is a 6x6 plate or 15 centimeter plate. Pour 80 mils. 80 mils should get me there with the density that I want to bring out in this negative. And then I'm going to actually add 10 drops of this 9%. This is right out of my silver bath. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 drops of that. So now our solution, we go on and on and on. I want to show you the density right now before we even start. Okay, there's the density. Now watch this. It'll take a minute or two, but watch my technique here.
Now, a lot of you would say, "Wow, that's dense enough. What are you doing? That negative is perfectly fine." But keep in mind, we're dealing with printing out processes. We're dealing with not develop out paper like silver gelatin, where you use a chemical to bring the print out. We're doing contact prints using light energy to print that image out. So these negatives have to be quite dense. You'll see here. You'll see how dense I get this.
Quinn, can I jump in here? Or
yes.
Would I assume you're building this up for a salt print or an albumin?
Yes, sir. Yes. The density, that's a good point. What Dale's referring to there is you need to know what you want your negatives for. I've said this a lot before, but this is where it applies. I appreciate that question or that comment because you need to know what you plan on printing before you ever make the negative, because you can't make the negative with the proper density for every single pot process. You have to kind of pick and choose. There's a lot that'll overlap and a lot will be fine. But if you're doing albumin or salt or something dense, heavy, you're going to want some punch. And this will be salt print, I believe, is what I do here. Great comment though, Dale. Yes.
On, keep that meniscus rolling around. That's why I like to break it with a little distilled water. Just to break that meniscus. And notice the color of our solution is clear. Watch when we're finished with this.
It's going to pull the iodine out of the silver and replace it.
You need super clean images to do this. If you have any fogging or your shadow areas or your void areas have any developed silver in them or anything, they'll just plug right up. So this is a process that you want to make sure you have your ducks in a row for. And just work it on and on. You see it starting to change color a little bit now. You can leave it as on there as long as you want. You can do as many cups as you want too. If 80 mils didn't get me there, I'll put a little more in. But I'm just going to work it here. About halfway down. You'll see it starting to change color. Now let me to see that.
Sorry.
Now, see that? You can really start to see that. So what if our magic number was 8 for a perfect negative? Well, I'm adding 2 seconds with this chemical. I'm adding 2 seconds of light. So
just for time, I'm going to speed it up a little.
From here to that crystal type. It's getting quite orange, pulling that all back out. To call that good. That's as much density as I want. Why am I rinsing this first initial rinse off with distilled water? Because I have a little bit of silver nitrate in that. Rinse all that out.
Look at that thing. That's rock solid.
Maybe you, I don't know.
I always love doing this. It's just an amazing process to see.
Look at our density that we built. That will print very nicely on a piece of collodion chloride paper.
Oh, I guess I do collodion
chloride. Do you have to
chloride.
wash anymore? No. I'm just going to rinse this off real good in this pan here. And collodion chloride paper.
So,
do you have to wash anymore? No.
So as we look at this, that's just a little scene where the bottles where I photographed it with some North White. Now, actually, Dale, this was for a collodion chloride print. But at the end of the day, you need to know what you're redeveloping for. That was one 80 mil cut on quite a thin negative to begin with. So, but you get the idea there, right? I mean,
I'm just going to rinse this off. We are going to call that good. And that is redeveloping a wet collodion negative for printing out paper or pot paper.
so cool. So there was the first one. Oh, do I have, okay, let me restart my little show here. I guess I can't close that down until I do, huh? Oh, there it is. I don't know, my little show just, let me pull this back up. I guess I had one more shot of it there at the end. Is that playing? Yeah. I guess I don't need the print. Anyway. So there's a demonstration of taking a plate that's a little thin for pot printing and redeveloping. Pretty straightforward stuff. Anybody can do this. It's just a matter of technique and handling the chemistry. You notice I'm wearing gloves there, right? It's pyrogallic acid. Pyrogallic acid is not good for you, so you want to make sure you wear gloves if you're going to handle the stuff. So there's the first, just kind of a quick overview of the technique. Now I want to show you something. I'm going to skip through a little bit of this because this is, how many in here? Can you raise your hand? I was just curious this morning. How many people in here, or at least live here, and you guys can chime in on YouTube or whatever you're on. How many in here were making either positives or negatives 11 years ago? Boguslaw was awesome. Boguslaw, 1 year idea for yeah, that's cool. This video, this is some fat guy, some fat American with long hair in Europe, prancing around in a cemetery in Käfertal, making these wet collodion negatives and talking to these German people. It's weird, but this was 11, almost 12 years ago. I fell in love with making negatives and prints in 2004. That's when I started making negatives and prints. Albumin prints is what I started with. And so after a certain amount of time, you kind of lose that the details of when you're trying to describe processes to people. But you'll see in this video, you'll get a kick out of it. No, I'm not coming down on the guy. He's just fat and he's got long hair. So if you don't recognize him, that's okay. Let's go over here and let's pull this video up. How dense should it be for carbon printing? Great question, Freed. You know, carbon printing is fairly close to, it's kind of in between the salt and like a collodion aristotype or something, fairly dense, but not albumin dense or not salt dense. You can, if you're good enough and you know what you're doing with carbon printing, you can work about any negative, but that's a good question. What else do we have here? Just, can we, Samuel says, let's do this. How long can we use 1 cup until everything is spilled? That's a great question. Use 1 cup on and off until it naturally kind of goes away. And when your solution is really dark and it's pulled all that iodine back out, you know you're fin, you're at the end. So on and off until it's gone, put fresh pyro in, add your silver, and go back again. If you want more density, it's up to you. You're never late, Jacques. It's no problem at all. Light full mind photography, welcome. I would like to hear more about the copper sulfate process. I've seen good results with it, and my own attempt looks good, printed nicely, more importantly. Oh, okay. Well, that's a great comment, basically. The only way you get better midtones is if they were already there in the negative or the image, right? Because the pyro is going to be your preferred method. And again, I'm not saying intensification doesn't, it's fine. It's just going to require a little more time, a little more money, and a little more maintenance of the other chemistry, the other chemicals to do that. It's common. Write me an email if you want to know more about it. I'm happy to give you the whole rundown. I've done a lot of copper intensification on plates, a lot of them. Cool. Yeah, that is pretty cool, Chris. I like it. Do you need nitro? Yes. Always wear gloves, and always get nitrile gloves without the powder. You don't want the powder in them. I was one. What is that, Steve? I guess I missed that. Sorry. Malik says, yep. Tom, good to see you, brother. I'd like to see the ferrous sulfate part B recipe again. Do you completely replace the citric acid with glacial acetic acid? Tom, write me an email. I'm not sure what you mean by that, brother. Yes, redevelopment is very interesting and it's very fun. I'm kind of a control freak, so I can tune everything in. I don't like a one and done thing so much, like the copper intensification gives you. But if you're into that, do that. If that's going to get you the negative that you need, do whatever that is that you need to do, whatever you prefer for whatever reason. That's one of the best comments I've had. Nothing like making a man feel young, right? I was almost 9. Oh God, sorry. I love it. I don't know. Wondering about copper too. I use potassium bromide. Is there? No, bromide. It's it all acts the same. You're all going to convert that over. The copper sulfate, the bleaching agents, the two salts there, copper sulfate and the bromide, ammonium or potassium, and they're going to bleach that silver down, meaning that it's going to open it up to receive the silver nitrate when you drop it in the pan. Either one will work. Absolutely. My pleasure. Okay. So back to this fat guy showing you a video in Germany 11 years ago. Share screen.
Isn't that your brother?
Yeah, that's my older, actually younger brother now. Yeah, let's see. Can we see that up there? Yes, we can. Oh, sorry. Let me remove that comment. Okay, here we go. Let me expand that out. View, present. And I will skip through some of this because it's just, it's a wee bit long.
Hello and welcome to the March 2010 piece. It's got all kinds.
An artist gave me that.
Come over here. Check this out. We're using Carl. Here it is in all its glory. Come on over here. It's a beautiful setup here. You've got everything in it that you need, and works great. Okay, so I'm going to use this Collodion. You see the color of it? It's kind of old and red, drain bottle. It's probably 8 or 9 months old, and I'm going to go for some contrast because we're going to do negatives in this Friedhof for the cemetery here, and we'll get a couple of images. The angel, I know we'll get one of that, and this will give us a little more contrast. So if you have the old red Collodion or the new guy or the ammonium iodide Collodion and it's old, works great for this. So we're also going to use this negative developer. And all this is positive developer that it's diluted 50-50 with distilled water. It's just half the strength, basically. And one more thing, there's a preparation. When you go out in the field like this, what I do is I prepare the plate that I want to use, and I clean it, deburr it, clean it, and then I wrap it up in a nice paper towel. And I also edge it with albumin. So it's edged, because I know I'm going to make a negative, and if I use pyro on it, it shrinks the collodion, so I need that. It's clean, and then I put it in an envelope like this.
Did you guys catch that? Why do you edge the plate with albumin or do the whole thing with albumin? You do that because if you're going to redevelop, pyrogallic acid shrinks collodion, and sometimes it'll pull it off the edge of the plate. So you want to albuminize at least the edges or the entire plate. And if you do the entire plate, it'll give you a little density. But that's why. I just wanted to make sure you caught that.
Mark what it is. And I have a set of these, and I can use them as I need. And you can do that with black glass as well too, of course. But you don't want to be doing that stuff out in the field like here. And so that's what we're going to use. We're going to use some whole plate clear glass. We're going to make a couple of negatives today.
You guys have seen this image probably before, or some of you have. This is where I made it. 6 seconds at F8. Let's see what that gives us as a foundation
So
negative.
here's our first attempt at the angel in the cemetery here in Käfertal. And we're going to go ahead and fix this now. And I'm going to use potassium cyanide because it does give some spectral sensitivity. This is a 6-second exposure.
So I'm counting off to where it clears, and then I'm going to count again.
So there you go. That's nice and clear. And I'm just going to let it go for just a little tad bit longer. And again, this is a negative. So
it looks terrible as a positive.
And go ahead and grab some wash water here. We're out here in the field, so it's a little bit bulky to do this.
So the rule is always look at negatives with transmitted light and positives with reflected light with something behind. Never the other way around. Negatives should look terrible against something black. Negatives should look terrible trying to reflect light off of them, typically.
It's almost there here. Now let's go ahead and take a look at it. Transmitted light, because that's all we're really interested in.
Boom!
And that actually, without even any intensification, would print actually quite well. I'm going to try one more.
So no, I'm not that good. I got lucky, F8 at 6 seconds. I just got lucky with the right light conditions. That's all that was. So it's not like I knew what was going on. It was, I was experimenting and trying to find, and I just happened to get one, right? I mean, sometimes you do. We used to say, when I was a photojournalist years ago, I'd bring back an assignment photograph or a feature photograph for the newspaper, whatever I was working for. And the editor would say, oh man, that's good. Even a blind groundhog finds an ear of corn now and then. So now I'm going to do this headstone here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So I went 1 second longer, but the light had changed a little bit, right?
So we just made the negative here. I exposed it at F8 for 8 seconds, and I'm going to go process this.
2 seconds longer.
You got it. Let's take a look at this negative now. This is what it looks like pre-fit and fix.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello. This is called Collodion, Masterplan. Collodion.
Hello.
Hello. And I just came to the Friedhof to make some plates, some negatives, to print. Yeah. This is pre-fixed though. I'm gonna put it in the back here now and fix it. Okay. You can see it. If you want, it takes 2 seconds. Oh, you have to work.
I have to work.
Yeah. Thanks for your interest. What I want, all the black areas, that's what I want. So yeah, this is going to make a gorgeous print. But this is going to be a good candidate for redevelopment.
Yes, perfect. Perfect.
When we get back to the.
Okay, we're back in the studio. We're going to redevelop this now.
And you want about that color. It doesn't have to be like a wine color somewhere in there. It doesn't have to be exact. But that'll work. Okay? So that's the first step. Then we'll go in here and we'll make the potassium bromide and the copper sulfate acid. Mixing bottle, and we need 2 cups.
This is just where I'm mixing the pyro and stuff. We're going to skip through this and get right to the redev.
And we're going to do one of these negatives now. So let's go ahead. Let me show you how to do this. I'll go ahead and do this one first. This is really beautiful here. I hope we can punch this up a little bit. I think that one probably will print on it fine on its own. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just like developer almost, I'm going to take the iodine And you see the color of it here now. Now watch when I put the iodine on it. It'll take a few seconds. And this is hard on the nose, so pour out, a decent amount of iodine on the plate. Make sure you're ventilated real well. And I'm just going to work it around. So we're getting there. On the back, don't be tricked by the color of the iodine on the back. Just this. Look at how greasy it is, just like Developer again. So there it is now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk upstairs and we're going to put it out in the sun for the UV 30 seconds. Here we just notice again, I can't emphasize enough. Those shadow areas have to be clear glass for this to work. Because if it isn't, you will plug those up and the thing will never print. So just a couple more seconds and we're good. So anytime I deal with anything with silver nitrate in it, I always rinse the plate with distilled water. My silver nitrate, I'm just going to put a few drops in here. I try to keep the back of the plate. We're getting there.
We'll just get to the end result here.
And I still want a little more than that, actually, just a little bit more controlled. We're going to be awfully close right here. Turn it over. This is hot. Pyro, the edges of this are all albuminized. Like I said, I edged them. Collodion, pyro shrinks collodion like crazy. So you've got to be very careful when you're, if you plan on doing a negative, you've got to make sure that you have that albuminized, or the plate. And you can see there, that's about the density that we want for salt and or albumin. Actually, salt requires a little more density. We're going to get a lot of detail in there. That's beautiful. So I'm just going to wash that for a while and set that over here. There is a whole plate redeveloped negative.
Perfect. Good deal. So here's the thing, just in those examples, we didn't talk much about the actual plate. I saw somewhere, was it yesterday I was reading, someone was complaining about how messy plates are, or you only see these really super clean plates, or whatever the argument was. When you're messing with negatives, when you're trying to make negatives, you need super clean plates. And what I mean by that, you can't overdevelop at all. Once you start depositing silver, unexposed silver in those shadow or void areas where the glass should be clear, you're going to intensify or redevelop all that. And you'll just mud the whole thing out. It will not print. It will not work. So super clean plates, number one. Understanding exposure, hugely important. There are just some basics that you have to have. So you can't redevelop a plate that has any fog or veiling on it. It won't work. It will not work. Fareed, I saw the other day, you had, was it a little skull or something? And it was trying to be clear glass and it wasn't quite. If you were to take that and redevelop it, you just plug everything up on that plate, because we need that distinct separation of black and white to get that contrast for the print. You need it clear. You need it super, super clear and good in albumin and salt and some of the other processes that require heavier, denser negatives. Never mix tap water with any AgNO3, any silver nitrate. If you had silver or going to put silver nitrate on this plate or had silver nitrate on this plate, rinse it with distilled water, deionized water. Never have any mineral water come into contact with that. Follow the technique as closely as you can and watch for signs that you have the density you want, and make sure you follow the recommended amounts of the pyrocitric and AgNO3. So let's take some of these. Saludos, Bogota. I have Collodion that's a 1.5 years. Yes, you can do either, Chris. 1.5 years old, it's probably red like that iodine. You can make some images outside, make sure there'd be negatives, but you could do that. Or you can use it to hop up your new collodion mixture if you need to ripen that up quick. Do you sometimes make directly a negative without a test plate? Obviously, yeah, Samuel, I just did that for you. I actually had a pretty good idea living in Germany for as many years as I did, and certain times of year, certain light, I kind of knew just because I've made so many plates. I do actually. But if I'm in a new environment or something, I have no clue, or new chemistry, using a different lens, whatever variable, I'll make it positive. But you're right, Samuel. You should make it positive. He's absolutely correct on that. And Camilo, Quinn, how many times, hours, or days do you apply the albumin before you use a plate with Collodion? Does the albumin's age affect the process? Your English is great, and I love your cat. That's so cute. That's a great question. Albumin, you can edge the plate, or you can steam it and pour it on, and all you have to do is let it dry, and it dries quickly. And I've stored edged or fully albuminized glass plates for months, 6 months, 8 months. I used to go on little rampages, and I'd cut 50 pieces or 70 pieces of whole plate glass, and over a few days deburr them and clean them and edge them, and then put them in envelopes and store them away. So I could just go in and grab a handful and go to the field when I was ready. And I've had them last 8, 9, 10 months, no problem. That's a great question. Fareed, what's your preferred version of keeping it moist, honey, sugars, or glycerin? Glycerin. Fareed is asking about keeping the plate moist or wet longer. So if you wanted to redev at home, you'd use a 50-50 glycerin right after you fix or before you fix. Put your plate away, it'll stay wet. Wash the glycerin and water off when you get home. Fix it, redevelop it, wash it, whatever you want to do. The honeys and sugars are great, but they're sticky and messy, and I don't like them. They're just too much. Molasses and the heavy beers and all that stuff. I mean, they're great for this, but you know, the oxymel, the honey and not oxymel. The honeys and the sugars are just too sticky for me. Coca-Cola and all that stuff. Glycerin, I prefer glycerin. 50-50, half glycerin, half distilled water. You're good to go. Absolutely, Camille. So let's go back. So those are some of the things to follow. Technical question. So Greg Carson messaged me.
Quinn, can I jump in before we get away from the negatives? I don't know if it's a question or a point, but I want to go back to the discussion on the foundation of actually making the negative right out of the gate, making the negative. And the question has to do with the collodion. We can adjust the NH4I to work on the midtones in the collodion. If we make the negative collodion, how much of a difference is that going to play when it was fresh compared to, let's say, a 6-month-old positive collodion, which has built up a lot of contrast with the through the evaporation of the solvents that are in here? You're ending up with pretty much the same net result at the end of the day.
I got you. Yes, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, and it's a great conversation to have because I've said this a million times. You do not need to make negative formulas to make negatives. They may be a little tougher to do, but Dale, your point is well taken. I'll try to sum it up real quickly. Dale's asking if you have some old seasoned, highly iodized positive NH4I collodion that you make ambrotypes and tintypes with, what's the difference between that and a new freshly made negative recipe as I lay out in the book there? Not much. In fact, you may be better off using that old highly iodized positive collodion. You may be better off doing that. The only thing that you will gain really from the negative, using the freshly made negative, is that you may get a little more subtlety in your midtones and not be so harsh. It just depends on if it's really super old stuff, you're going to be really high contrast on the positive. You'd be better off using the negative stuff. But you're right. a fresh batch of negative collodion versus a highly iodized positive, we separate those, to Dale's point, we separate those to get that contrast, to get that tonal range, that density rather. And the NH4I, or the ammonium iodide in the collodion, is not stable. It breaks down very fast, versus like a cadmium iodide, which will never break down in collodion, right? It stays forever, CDI does. So what we're doing, we're looking, and even when I make positive, I'm still looking for a highly iodized collodion, because I love that tonal range. I love all the stuff that it gives me. I cannot stand to open up Facebook or Instagram or whatever and see all these bright, blowing out flat collodion images. Everyone tends to overexpose, and they don't exploit even the positive process of this. And when you do that with negatives, you'll never make a negative. But Dale, to your point, I've used plenty of old positive collodion to make great negatives. That may have been right there in that little show you just saw. That could have been old positive. I don't know if I mentioned. That's so long ago, I can't remember that far back. But great question. Thank you for asking that. Where do you dispose of the rest of the chemicals for redeveloping the photo tub? If there's pyro or other dangerous chemicals, do you do it in all one canister? Yes, this is what you can do. How I dispose of those is I usually have a couple of these 20-liter buckets, the 5-gallon big box store buckets. I just drain everything off into there and let it evaporate off. And you get, they get ugly buckets and all that. And there are other ways to, most of this stuff you don't need to dispose of, right? Your collodion doesn't go away. Your plate cleaner doesn't go away. Your developer one-off goes away. It doesn't matter though, right? It's vinegar, iron, water, and a little bit of alcohol if you have any in there. So there's your fixer doesn't, you reuse that. You can dispose of that quite easily too. But there's not a lot of waste in collodion, which is good. But good question on what you do with the old chemistry. Do you store the glycerinized plates underwater or store them dry? Hey, Carson, you can just put them in a rack. They're going to stay wet for months, maybe a year. That glycerin is not going anywhere. That's the whole idea. You mix half and half glycerin and water. It'll keep your plates wet for weeks and months. And you get home, you wash them off, you fix them, you redevelop them, wash them, whatever you're doing, right? So yeah, no water. That's the idea, is to get away from packing all that water into the field and giving yourself a chance to get back to your studio or dark room and do the heavy duty stuff. Fixing, washing, redeveloping. Would you say that negatives are much more contrasted today due to the research in science chemistry than they would have been in 1860? No. In fact, quite the opposite, I think. We've trained ourselves up in these other disciplines, silver gelatin, now digital, which really doesn't even apply to this at all. But no, they knew exactly what kind of density they wanted for what types of prints they were making. The most common type of print was the albumin print, and that requires quite a bit of density in the negative. So they were on it. We tend to be a little weak. We tend to make flat, nasty prints with our negatives because we don't have the density and the contrast we need, right? And then on the positive side, we overexpose and flatten everything out. We don't get any detail. So there's a lot of that kind of back and forth going on. You're very welcome, Chris. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Wow, you can keep those plates wet forever and a day. Are there better or less good recipes on collodion to use for negatives? Maybe even to premix for a shoot in a few months only. You know what, Fareed? Here's the thing. If you're not using NH4I, ammonium iodide, for your negative collodion, you're going to struggle. No matter how old your old dead grandmother or old shot in the head pony collodion or whatever they call it, if they're using a KI or whatever, you're going to wait a very, very long time to get enough iodide, to highly iodize that collodion, to get that collodion highly iodized to make a negative. It's going to be a pain. I recommend making negative developer and negative collodion right? Like, a week before you're going to shoot, get your silver bath in line and get your glass prepared and be ready for it. And you can work it that way. I wouldn't try to use a positive, especially a Ki, a potassium iodide that's not soluble in those solvents. I wouldn't try to use that on negatives. Can you? Yeah, you can. Of course you can. But okay. Good questions. I appreciate those, guys. I really do. Greg Carson. He wrote me and asked me about what kind of plate holder is the best. Is better. I almost flipped that. What kind of plate holder is best to use? I prefer like he talked about, the open book, the traditional open up the back, put your holder, your inserts in, take your plates out, whatever, versus the slide, the old film converted kind of slide stuff. You have more room in those traditional plate holders. They're easier to work. There's just a lot of advantage. Sometimes converted plate holders, the film holders that you could cut out the septum and convert them for wet plate. Sometimes the dark side will get warped and scratch the plate. The edges aren't quite right. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. I prefer the old school, open it up like a book plate holder. That's my preference. So just my preference, though. It doesn't mean it's right. He says, I've been curious about what good aspects are for designing or laying out a studio for wet plate photography. Thought this might make an interesting Saturday subject someday, or today even. How about that? I thought a southern window would be needed, but then see people mentioning northern windows in their studios. Exactly. Marie and I were talking the other day, and when you come into this process with all these preconceived notions about photography, you're going to struggle a little bit, because you got to push all that traditional stuff out the window and start thinking and seeing and living in Collodion, how Collodion sees, what it likes, what it doesn't like. And some of those silver gelatin traditions are really hard to break. The southern window is one of them. That golden glow light, terrible for Collodion, right? Different for film, different for digital, but terrible for Collodion. So the southern window will do you no good. 3,300 Kelvin temperature will do you no good, or not much good in Collodion. You're looking for that north sky, what's called actinic light, high UV A and B light, to stream in through a window that does not restrict UV. That's another big thing, and stream into your studio. And that's what I'm building right now. In fact, yesterday and the day before, I was just working on this, building my studio. I'm using not glass, but a plexiglass that allows 98% penetration of UV A and B through. So my studio, north is right here in my direction, or sorry, behind me. North, the studio will be facing north, letting that big blue sky in, exactly opposite of what we're talking about for film and digital. We want that high UV actinic north sky. So when you lay out your studio, remember two things: north light and UV penetration on your glass or plexi or whatever you've got. I did workshops in Berlin quite a bit, or a few of them in Berlin, and a fine young lady up there that invited me up. She had a nice studio. I went up there for the first one, did a bunch of portraits, this and that. I think we did some negative work. I know we did. And she writes me a few weeks later. She says, "Oh my God, Quinn, I cannot get my portraits to work. I'm right next to my window. I set my sitter right next to the window. I open up F4 and I open up for 40 or 45 seconds, and I barely get an outline of the face on the highlight side." And I'm like, wow, And she's saying, I've tried everything. My chemistry's good, all that stuff. And then it dawned on me. It's like, you're in a newer building, right? Open that window up and then do the same thing. And she went from no image at 40 seconds or barely an image at 40 seconds to a perfectly nice, beautiful image in 5 seconds. Those windows block UV. The Collodion cannot see. It is blind. It cannot see. And the best test, and I say this in my book, the best test to do if you're in a new situation, you've never made a plate in this situation, and there's a window and someone wants you to photograph next to the window, take a paper towel, take your silver bath, put a little ring of paper, a little dollop of silver nitrate on your paper towel, and go set it in the windowsill. If you don't see that turning brown or pink in 30 or 45 seconds or a minute, you've got no UV coming through that window. None. Nothing. So you either have to open the window or go find a different spot. Really important. And preferably you'd want that north window on the north side as well too. But yeah, so they're great questions. Thank you for those, Greg. I appreciate those. Jacques says that must explain why one of my plates was 9 minutes in direct sunlight beside the window. That sounds about right. Yeah, 9 minutes in direct sunlight in the window. That is look, most windows, if you're talking post 2000, even post 1990s, even sometimes, definitely after the year 2000, 21 years ago, windows are going to be highly protected. In fact, some of them you'll even see that green tint on. They'll be highly protected. People don't want, UV is very hard on carpets and furniture and dashboards and all this kind of stuff, right? Cars. So yes, that's it. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great example of that. And that's exactly what happens. Your exposures go forever and a day. And to be honest with you, the images aren't quite there. It's like kind of trying to make a cake without baking powder or eggs or yeast or something. There are components missing there. It doesn't quite work. It works, but not as well as it could if you had full UV. Those are good. I need that shot pony recipe. I like that. Sorry. Pablo says, just for not taking iodized AgNO3 off the silver bath, could some silver nitrate be iodized some other way? Pablo, do you mean highly iodizing your silver bath, or do you mean that? Talk to me, brother. Sometimes I'm slow on some mornings. I'm very slow, so I need you to explain it to me like I'm a fourth grader, brother. You can iodize. Oh, iodizer for adding to pyro. Iodizer for adding to pyro. No, that's citric acid. Citric acid and silver nitrate. You can use straight silver nitrate. It doesn't have to. I'm sorry. You can use straight silver nitrate. Doesn't have to be from your bath. It can be, but silver nitrate. If you wanted to mix up 100 mils, put 9 grams in 100 mils and go for it. Yeah, exactly. That's good. Yep, good. Thank you. I apologize for not understanding that. So, does this mean that the window glass you get custom cut will block UV while making prints? That really depends. Yes, there's glass that will definitely block. I tell people, somebody came in, brought in a negative in a workshop, and it was on that UV green glass. It just wouldn't print, right? It just wouldn't let anything through. So yes, you'll run into problems with that as well too. It's mostly oh, what are you saying there, Samuel? Is Samuel saying no to that? I've seen the green glass not print for sure. So it depends, Oh, no UV, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, it's an interesting topic as you play with this and you discover things about the process. And there are certain things it just demands. UV is one of them. If you don't have enough UV, you're not going to make a strong image, and you might not make an image at all, to be honest with you. So they're good questions. Good questions. Look at that. Recommended reading. Yes. This is the book. I love Zarkowski anyway, but this is the book that got me into wet collodion photography. He has, I tell this story over and over again. You open the book up, there's a calotype, there's a daguerreotype, and then there's a 6-plate ambrotype. And it's a stagecoach, and this guy in this top hat just got that 1,000-mile stare kind of thing going on. And I fell in love with that. Warts and all the artifacts around it, everything. And I just went gangbusters. That was right at the turn of the 21st century. That 99, 2000. 2000 is when I fell out of love with photography that year. And this book saved me. And this book brought me into wet collodion. And I highly recommend, not just for the history, but Zarkowski alone. Zarkowski's the guy that brought Deanne Arbus into the MoMA. Zarkowski's the guy that brought Eggleston into the MoMA. These are some great photographic history and important events, and he was primarily in charge of that. He's written a lot of good stuff. I highly recommend that book. If you don't have it, get it, or at least try to find it and look at it. Recommended watching. Years and years ago, I was introduced to Shelby Lee Adams. He's a friend of mine on Facebook now. He's quite a bit out there. He does some really, he's a kindred spirit to me in a lot of ways. He works in the hollers in Kentucky. He does mostly portraiture work. I'll play this little piece here. This film's called The True Meaning of Pictures, and it's quite powerful if you haven't seen it.
Hey, Joe. You all right? Yeah. I brought some with me. What do you think of that?
That's Shelby there.
How you doing?
Pretty good, how you?
Good, thanks. What y'all been doing today?
Nothing. Sitting around at the house.
Works with Polaroid and 4x5 Polaroid and strobes, or he used to. I'm not sure what he's doing right now, but.
The Nature family, which I met in 1985 in Beehive, Kentucky. I was amazed when I first went there. They lived in the head of a holler and 4 or 5 different little houses with chickens and hound dogs and other animals running around in the yard. And I thought of them as a typical historical Appalachian family, living like a family might have lived 100 years ago.
You like having a big family, John?
Why, it's all right, boys. It works a man hard, don't it? Man, I work for $100 a day. Couldn't save a dime.
John was a mountain man who wore overalls and a cap, farmed his land, very traditional Appalachian roots.
We lived our 46 years now. That's a long time for somebody to live at one place. I never did bother nobody.
Bertha Napier had the spirit and a dignity that had an inner strength in it that's rare, that one would rarely see.
What about you and me? I would see this whole place here go up to the top of the hill, top of the mountain there, and corn and beans.
Is that right?
That's right. And I hope for dinner.
Yep.
And you believe, at the first time, my daddy moved up here, and I didn't have shoes to wear.
Is that right?
And that's that right there.
Is that right?
Little John?
Huh?
You have shoes to wear?
No.
We split her barefoot, winter and summer.
Wintertime, too.
Winter and summer.
With snow on the ground.
Snow on the ground.
Yeah.
We got soft hardwood, for our grate,
Yeah.
barefoot.
Ah.
That's right.
First pair of leather shoes you ever had in your life. New shoes.
Yeah.
I think women in her generation, they farmed and worked the hillsides right beside the men. They planted corn, they hoed corn. We're talking acres. They would go out for all day, and they would come home and cook meals. It was an incredible hard life.
You worked on sawing mine?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's man's work, huh?
Yeah, timber just like a man.
That's right.
Put me a pair of overalls on, or a boy's shoes, put me on a man's shirt, and take the cross step on my shoulder, and get out, go to 165 timbers a day.
Is that right?
Me and the man and woman. We'd haul the men on the yard, as fast as we could cut them, with a mule. And we saw all day, up till 4 o'clock, just enough to get our suppers. That's right. That's right, now, that is true. And we worked hard in their life.
So yeah, if you like, um, if you like, or have an interest like I do in marginalized communities and the human condition, in other words, I find people like this, and Shelby Lee Adams, I was introduced to him when I was, really struggling, trying to find out what I wanted to do in photography. Although I was working professionally in photography for years and years, what I personally wanted to do. And Shelby Lee Adams really, along with Deanne Arbus and Richard Avedon and Sally Mann and Mary Ellen Mark, and go on and on and on and on, right? These people I felt a connection with, and what they were interested in, what they were doing photographically, what they were doing philosophically, introducing us to people that we've never met before, and these people having this unbelievable quality of finding meaning in their life, having nothing and finding meaning, and it's I'm almost envious in a weird way about Deanne Arbus did the same thing, Richard Avedon did the same thing, Mary Ellen Mark did the same thing. But great film. If you haven't seen it, you should go find it and download it and watch it, because at the end of the day, you will not regret the time spent with Shelby Lee Adams and his vision. He's just like anybody that's pushing the envelope. He gets, he's been criticized for, I always say there's a fine line between exploration and exploitation. He's been criticized just like Sally Mann and Richard Avedon and all these people about exploiting people. I don't think he exploits people. I think he's definitely connected to the place. He's from there. He's got interests in the people and the place, and it goes deep. He's a thinker. He's a philosopher, and I think he loves humanity. I think he really does, truly does love humanity. So watch it if you can. If you're in lockdown and you don't have anything better to do, watch it. Let's do this. Let's go back over one more thing. Let's do share the screen. Let's do this. Recommended reading, recommended watching, present. I don't know, for some reason I have to go in and out of these before I can get back to. All right, shout outs. Dale's right here with us. He can chime in here, but I've known Dale for a few years. I don't know exactly how many, like 2 or 3 maybe. I don't know how many. I lose track of time.
I think your age is showing, Quinn. It's probably more 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. Good. Excellent. Thank you.
Believe me, not that I'm keeping track.
No, I do lose track, but I know people, I know faces, and I'll usually get names. But Dale's been, for me, one of those people that is not only upstanding, but really does his homework. In other words, there's so many people that will come into this process and just want to ram right through it and get right to whatever it is they're doing and not enjoy any of the journey. Dale is completely opposite of that. So he's in Canada, and he's open. How long have you had this open? You've had this open a couple, 3 years, haven't you?
Yeah, I think the little store opened in 2015, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'd have to go back and look it up, but I think it's 2015.
Regardless, you're providing a service for Canadians in Collodion. Canada is kind of like one of those places where you think, oh, well, you're, North America, you should be able to get everything and do everything and all that. It doesn't work like that. No. The Canadian dollar, the import, all the stuff and the regulations they have are a little different than what we have. So he struck a deal up with Mike at Artcraft, and he can distribute. If you're in Canada, get a hold of Dale and you need wet Collodion stuff. He's exceptional. He'll treat you right. He knows what's happening, and I can't recommend him any more than saying go get on his. If you're in Canada, go get on his list. And people write me several times a month. I'm in this part of Canada. Where can I get? Go see Dale. I'm in Canada. Do you know where I can get? He's got a reputation out there now, and it's growing. So most people know. But after all these years, I guess 6 or 7, whatever it's been, I wanted to give him a little nod on this show. And let
thanks for that, Quinn. But I think you're going to have a lot of, well, I'll put it bluntly, pissed off Canadians, because now I've got to increase the prices by 10% to be able to afford the check for your testimonial.
Yeah, right. I know I'm rolling in these Canadian dollars here. I'm just,
oh yeah,
you can't see them behind me, but I'm just rolling in the Canadian dollars. No, seriously, I think you provide people who step up and do the heavy lifting for people so they can get their chemistry or equipment and get started in this. That's one less thing a new person coming into this process has to deal with. And that's a godsend, especially if that supplier is doing it right and Dale is doing it right. There are suppliers out there that aren't doing it right all over the world, that just in it for a quick buck or in it for whatever. I don't know what they're in it for. You've got to watch where you buy chemistry from. And you've got to have that person on that other end, like Mike at Artcraft or Brian at UV Photographics, or people in America here that you can rely on. You've got to have that. So I wanted to shout him out and say thanks for providing those services. I get a lot of Canadians asking and communicating and asking me questions and doing all that stuff. So I know we went a little long. I knew we would, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Dale, chemical ship in 3 days. Oh, there you go. Well, there you go, right there, Dale. So if you don't have any questions, or do you have questions, I'm open to those. I know we went a little bit long, but I think at the end of the day, I hope you got something out of it. I mean, I probably spend too much time thinking about this through the week when I should be installing my dryer and no, I probably overthink things, so I'm not really sure where people are. And I try to keep it as basic, but you can only do basic so long, so you have to move on. But thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you for joining me. I hope you join us next week. Send me your email. Send me some photographs if you want to show some work here. Jeffrey will be back. He wrote me. He's in Canada as well. He's in BC. I think he's busy today doing something. He'll be back in the next couple of weeks to show his work. But if you have work, send it to me. Give me a description. We'll chat. If you have questions, if you want me to address something on this show every Saturday, let me know, because I'm happy to do it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Samuel. I appreciate your time. Well, people who spend an hour and a half in my world every Saturday, I'm the one that's grateful, not you guys. I am definitely grateful. Thank you, Chris. Steve, you're a good guy. I appreciate that. You guys have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next Saturday. Shoot me any emails or any questions or any ideas, and we'll see you next Saturday. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye. Adios.
Bye, Quinn.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. It was good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Have a good day. Bye-bye.